Welcome to Patchogue-Medford Library's Spice Cookie Tutorial. My name is Michael. I'm going to be walking you through it today. Before we get started with the recipe, I'm going to show you all the ingredients, and I'm going to walk you through a couple of basic tips right here, right now. So even if you don't like this recipe, you can take a lot of these tips and use in your general baking. It's going to come out a lot better when you make cookies. And we're going to have the link to this recipe in the description. So what we have over here is we have our sugar in there. We have 200 grams regular sugar, 150 of the light brown sugar. We have about 250 grams of regular flour and some whole wheat flour. I think it's 98 grams. I use a scale. I highly recommend everyone gets a scale, but if you don't, most recipe books now have both the metric and just cups in it as well. You're always a lot more accurate on metric. So that's my first major tip, is try to get yourself a scale. You can get a cheap one, and honestly a cheap one goes a long way. So we have two types of flour in here. We have some baking soda in here. And we also have three different types of spices, which is my little secret we have. We have a little bit of, I believe it is coriander, Chinese 5-spice, and nutmeg. I think that goes really well with the chocolate. We have 2 sticks of butter, so not necessarily a healthy cookie. And we have 2 eggs, and we have 2 different types of chocolate, and we have vanilla extract. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Before you ever do any baking, you want to make sure that your butter and your eggs are usually at room temperature, because we want to make sure everything throughout this bake before it hits the oven stays at kind of the same temperature, okay? And the other major tip I would give you, besides, so when you're making cookies in general, you want to leave your eggs and butter out a little bit. The more patient you are when making this, the better, okay? You want to be patient. The more patient you are, the more delicious your cookies are, okay? So usually, take out your eggs or your butter and leave it out for an hour or so, just so it hits room temperature. If it's super, super cold, it's going to be hard to whip the butter in with the sugar over here, okay? Now, the other thing I want to bring up here is, what kind of chocolate should you use? I personally think it's way better to use the bar over here, so you can cut it up into little chunks. You have different pieces of chocolate, and also a lot of chocolate chips have a lot of preservatives in it. And not leaving out the health part of it, when you have the chocolate chip preservatives, it's going to be a little bit harder to bake. I personally think you get a lot more results out of this. I sometimes cheat and still use this. That's why I still buy chips sometimes. But I'll leave it up to you. I will always recommend you get bigger chocolate, but you can use both if you want. Or you can even use a combination of both. And the final thing I'm going to recommend is vanilla paste over vanilla extract. Now, I usually go to places like Home Goods to try to get bean paste pretty cheap, because this can get very, very expensive. I've seen this in stores for $35 just for this small bottle. You don't have to do that. If you just want to use regular vanilla extract, that's absolutely fine. However, this is going to give your cookies a really, really amazing taste, okay? So I'm not going to show you all the steps in real time of me making the cookies. I am going to cut back and forth between certain parts of it, just so I can show off a couple of techniques for cookie making in general, okay? Even if you don't use this recipe, please keep following along, because there's a whole bunch of tips I want to show you that I've learned over the years while making my favorite batch of cookies. Okay, so now here I've added the sugar and the butter, and I gave it about 3 minutes of time. We're just trying to blend those two together right now, so we got this buttery, sugary mixture right here. And I also cracked my eggs over here. You should always crack your eggs into a separate bowl or ramekin, like I have over here. You never want to crack it directly in here, because if you get an eggshell in here, it's going to be so much harder to get out. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add the egg, and then I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla extract and give that a little bit more time to stir around. And then I'm going to cut back. I'm going to show you how to add the dry end. There's a very specific thing you really want to do there, and I really want to focus on that. Okay, so we have our butter in here, we have our eggs, we have our sugar. All that seems like it's good to go. Now, another thing we want to do is we want to add our dry, but we want to add a little bit at a time. I'm trying to avoid turning on my KitchenAid mixer on the video, just because it's going to get very loud. So I'm just going to do a little bit on each side. And I don't ever try to add the entire batch at a time, because we don't want this to clump, okay? And don't be worried if you make a little bit of a mess, right? If you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, I should have said this before, you can use a hand mixer. That works just as fine. I personally think KitchenAid mixers work really, really well, but they are kind of expensive and they're hard to get if you don't have them. So if you want to use a hand mixer, that's fine. Just keep in mind, again, no matter what you do with cookies, you really can't mess it up. There are so many things that you can do to just only make it better, okay? So I'm going to cut back after we add our chocolate chips and finish adding our dry, okay? So now we have our dry and wet ingredients mixed. The last thing we need to do is add the chips. Now you don't want to put too many chips in this, so that's why I would always follow a recipe down, because otherwise we want to make sure we have a nice even distribution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all the chips like this, and I'm going to fold it into the cookie dough. We're going to take a lot of time with it, because we want to make sure this comes out as evenly as possible, okay? So I'm going to mix it in, I'll cut back. And now we come to the biggest plot twist. My number one tip for all of you is when you make dough, you want to leave it in the refrigerator if you want to make it the next day, or the freezer if you want to make it several days in advance, but you never want to really try to make cookies the day you make the dough. If you let it rest, I promise you that flavor and the feel of the bite is going to be so much better. So you're going to want to wrap this up, and I'm going to throw this in the fridge. I'm going to wait a few hours. Usually I wait a full day, but I think for today, we're going to wait a few hours, because I really want to have these cookies today. So a few hours later, after we put our dough in the fridge, I took it out and shaped it into balls. You can use your hands, or you can use a ice cream scoop. I like to just use my hands, it's a lot easier to do. You want to get them around the same size, try to get the same chips in every cookie. I think they look more or less distributed, although some look like they have more than others, but that's okay. I have my oven set to 375, and you should do these cookies from, I think, 9 to 11 minutes. 11 if you want them crispier, 9 if you want them softer. I like them crispier, so I'm going to go for around like 10 or 11, okay? And the next time I cut back, you're going to see a complete cookie. And there you have it, our final creations. They look really good. Now, remember to let them cool off a little bit, because even when they're cooling, they're still technically cooking a little bit, okay? Now, once these cool, you can put them into a container or store them to the side or give them some friends and family. But no matter what you do with them, you have to enjoy this as soon as possible. They usually taste good within the first day or two, okay? So this is all I'm going to have for today. And please tune in next time to see more awesome Patchogue-Medford content, including some other amazing recipes in the future. Enjoy!